she just looked at me like I'd gone absolutely insane. Hi guys, it's Natasha, and today I'm going to be doing the Harry Potter Try Not to Cry themed challenge. Now I have a bunch of pictures on my phone that are Harry Potter related, sort of sad pictures or edits, and I'm basically just going to go through them and sort of react to them. And yeah, I'm hoping this video doesn't get too sad or sort of depressing, but there are some parts of Harry Potter that are very sad, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so the first one I have is, before Harry, the twins had found the mirror of Erised. When they looked into it, they didn't see anything except themselves, so they just thought it was a mirror. When George found it after the war, he looked in it again, expecting to see himself. While he was gaunt and underfed, the man in the mirror wasn't. Then his reflection looked towards the frame, and an identical man joined the man in the mirror. George saw his brother for the first time since his death and broke down. So, I think with the twins, Fred dying is so sad, and the fact that George has lost his twin brother is a devastating blow to the Weasleys. Losing Fred anyway is a big blow to the Weasleys, but for George, losing his twin, that is a loss on a whole other level, and I think it's absolutely crushing for them and for George, and it's the saddest thing ever, because the twin bond is definitely one of the closest bonds I've ever seen. I've got friends who are twins, and they are so close, they complete each other. For Fred and George, for George, losing Fred is like losing half of him, and it's so sad. It's definitely one of the saddest deaths in Harry Potter. The next one is just a picture of Harry in the Order of the Phoenix after Sirius's death, in the moments immediately after, and it's Lupin holding him back, as we see in the film, with Harry absolutely just devastated. And you can see in this picture and in the scene itself how crushed and how devastating and just how unexplainably sad Harry is losing Sirius, and the way that Dan has portrayed this scene is absolutely brilliant. I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but it said that that scene in the Order of the Phoenix was muted because Daniel's cry was so agonising. I don't remember where I read it, so I don't remember if that's a real confirmed fact or not, but it would make a lot of sense that it was, because the way that Daniel played it, he just put so much emotion into it, and you can see how much he understands that was a devastating loss for Harry. We see Harry go to the Ministry to fight for Sirius because he doesn't want to lose Sirius, and in the end he loses Sirius anyway, and I think it's definitely just devastating. So the next one is another Fred and George one. I think a lot of these will be Fred and George ones just because of how sad that loss is. So it's George sat in a corner and he's crying, and he's got a mirror on the floor that he's smashed, which really hits home because, like I said earlier, with how close they are and the twin bond and losing a twin and how devastating and crushing that loss is. For George, every time he looks in a mirror, he sees his brother, he sees Fred, and that's so sad. That's definitely going to make it so much harder to work through that loss because he's constantly reminded, and it's so sad. Another Fred and George one. This is definitely had a big impact on fans because so many people have made Fred and George edits. One is a picture of George in the Battle of Hogwarts. I think it's around the time where they see Harry, he's supposedly died, and Hagrid is carrying him. So it just says, "I don't know what hurts me more, Fred dying or George having to live without him." That is one of the most true things I've ever heard, ever. It's just a loss in Harry Potter does have a big impact on the fans because, these are the characters we've connected with for so long, and they mean a lot to us and to the story. So I think losing Fred was a big enough thing, but for George, losing his twin brother, that's just a whole other level. And they've known each other from the day they were born. They've never known life without one another. They've always just completed each other. And I think for George, losing that is going to be definitely the hardest thing that he will ever enjoy in his life. And it's so sad. It really is. And I think a lot of people are very upset with J.K. Rowling for killing Fred off. But as we know, every death was necessary in Harry Potter. Everything was related to the plot. And unfortunately, Fred was just one of those we lost. So the next one says, Harry and Ginny let Luna plan their wedding. During the ceremony, Harry looked out and saw a whole section of seats in the front row apparently reserved for no one, along with a single owl perch. After the service, Harry asked her who was meant to sit there. Well, they did sit there. In a spiritual sort of way, I suppose. She pointed out the seats one by one and said, Those 2 seats are for your mum and dad. That one is for Sirius. Those 2 are for Professor Lupin and Tonks. That one is for Mad-Eye Moody. That one is for Fred. That one is for Professor Dumbledore. That one is for Professor Snape. And the one on the end is for Dobby. And the perch is for Hedwig, because I know how much you loved her. I do hope they like the wedding, Luna waved into seemingly empty space before prancing off into the crowd. As Harry stood there, he felt a tear roll down his cheek. Harry had never felt so touched before. I love this one so much because, I don't know if this is a fanfic sort of thing, if it's a fan-made thing, or if it's a confirmed, maybe Pottermore fact that this happened. I have absolutely no idea. I just found it on Google. But it is the sort of thing you can imagine Luna doing, because we know that Luna lost her mum. So it's so sweet because you know that through losing her mum, she would be able to empathise with Harry and Ginny for the losses they've had throughout this Wizarding War. And you could definitely see that being something she would do. So in a way, it's really sad that it had to be done. But in a way, it's also really heartwarming because it's really touching because you can imagine that Luna would do that sort of thing. And it's sad but sweet. The next one says, can you imagine Mrs. Weasley getting to the magical afterlife one day and the first thing she sees is a girl with red hair sprinting towards her? For a fleeting moment, she thinks it's Ginny, but as the girl comes closer, she recognises the kind smile and emerald eyes that are shining with tears. It's Lily Potter. Lily pulls Mrs. Weasley into a tight hug and can only whisper 3 words before dissolving into tears. Thank you, Molly. That's so cute. No, that's so sweet because, Molly really was like a mum to Harry. She has been throughout the whole thing. She's been there for Harry. She's supported Harry. She's fussed over Harry like a mum does. She's done everything that she possibly could to help Harry, to be there for him. And I think in a way she's tried to not replace Lily, but try and help him to feel like he does have a mother figure that he can rely on and that he's never alone and that he's got a family. And I think it's so cute and it's so sweet that Molly did that for Harry. And I don't even think it was something she was consciously doing. I think that's just the way Molly is. It's so sweet. It really is. And you can imagine with everything she does for Harry that Lily is constantly watching over them and constantly just filled with so much pride and joy just to see Molly doing that for her son. I think it's just so cute. This video is definitely a bit intense. Oh gosh, another Molly and Lily one. Oh my gosh, these ones really do touch me because, I lost my dad when I was quite little. I was 4 when my dad died. I never really knew him, but I've always kind of missed that father figure. And, I've been in care for 5 years, since I was 13. So I think I understand and can sympathise and empathise with Harry about the loss of a parent and not having your parents around and having to be somewhere that you don't necessarily want to be. And I think that's why the Molly and Lily sort of having Lily and James sort of edits and things, and that whole storyline itself with him losing his parents, I think that's why it really touches me. So this one has like a picture of Fred at the bottom, and at the top it has a picture of Molly and Harry from The Order of the Phoenix. Just says, "Dear Molly, watching over Fred like you've been watching over Harry all these years. Love, Lily." I can't even. It's so sweet with everything I said about Fred and with Molly and things. It's so cute. No, I can't even. Let's just move on to the next one. Right. Oh gosh, another Fred and George one. These Fred and George ones are going to be the death of me. Dear Fred, remember when we put our names in the Goblet of Fire? I wish that hadn't been the only time we saw each other old. Always missing you, George. Oh my goodness. It's intense because, like I said earlier, with everything with the twins and that twin bond and things, and George losing Fred and how difficult that is. You know, they're never going to see each other old. They're never going to have that experience, and I just think that's too sad. No. Oh gosh. So this is Harry and Ginny when Ginny is comforting Harry after Dumbledore has died. And like I said earlier with the death of Sirius, Daniel just portrays these scenes so well. He portrays them so well, he puts so much emotion into them, and you can tell he really understands how Harry is feeling. He's really took the time to appreciate that. And he puts so much emotion into them, and it's so sad. You know, the scene with Dumbledore dying, that breaks me every time. I was watching it a couple of weeks back, and my foster carer was like, "Are you okay? You look like you've been crying." And I was like, "Yeah, just Harry Potter character death." She just looked at me like I'd gone absolutely insane. But it really does get to me every time. They are so sad. Okay, so we've got another one of Lupin and Harry with Sirius's death. They're just agonizing. You can just see it. You can just see the agony and the pain and the torture in these characters losing them, and it's I can't even imagine. Okay, so this one is a very sad one. It's the scene from the Deathly Hallows when Hermione and Harry go to Godric's Hollow and they go to James and Lily's grave. And it's just so sad because seeing Harry stood there looking at his parents' grave, you know, that should never be happening. A child or a young man should never be looking at his parents' grave at such a young age. You know, he's only 17. His parents, they died when they were 21, so he's 17. So they should be about 38. They should still be there with Harry. It's not fair at all. It's really not fair. Oh, okay, this one's another Fred and George one. And it's split into like 6. It's got different pictures of them throughout the years. And each picture has a different word on it, and it says, "When you lose something you can't replace." I think that's the words from the Coldplay song, "Fix You," which is so sad. I can't listen to that song. That song makes me cry. I can't listen to it. So seeing this picture and having that tune in my head from reading those words and things, it's so sad. I think if I look at that any longer, I'm going to end up crying. Okay, so the next one says, "Does anyone ever think that the reason Remus and Tonks made Harry the godfather of Teddy was because they knew they wouldn't make it out alive or highly doubted it, but always had faith in Harry? They knew that if anyone could understand his pain, Harry would in the event they died." Oh my gosh. That makes a lot of sense, that Remus and Tonks would understand, that Harry would understand how Teddy was feeling if he lost his parents in that battle, which he did. And I think it makes a lot of sense that they would make Harry godfather for that reason. I don't think that was the whole reason. I think that a lot of it was just because of how much Harry meant to them, especially to Remus, because of Remus being one of the Marauders. You know, he was best friends with Harry's dad. So I think partly he did it because of how much Harry meant to him. I think he definitely did it because of how much Harry meant to him. I think part of the reason he did it would be because he knew that maybe that would be what James would have wanted him to do. But also because in the event of their death, Harry would be the one who could best understand for Teddy and best be there for Teddy. I really do understand that. I think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Right. The next one. Whatever you do, don't think about the new Muggle-born first years wondering why so many of the ghosts are teenagers in modern-day clothing, and why so many people like to pet the air and wonder if that's some kind of magic custom or something, and not realising that they are all petting the Thestrals. That's, again, another very intense one, because you never really think about things, the small details like Muggle-born first years going to Hogwarts after the Battle of Hogwarts, not knowing things like how some people can see Thestrals and how some people can't. Because we know that even Hermione, who researched as much as she could in books about Hogwarts and the Wizarding World before going, even she didn't know about Thestrals and about you only being able to see them if you've seen Death, because maybe she kind of called Harry crazy. So, it makes sense that some Muggle-born first years would come and think, why are people petting the air? Because you forget how many people, how many students, young kids, would have seen Death in the Battle of Hogwarts. It's definitely very sad. The ghosts, the teenage ghosts, that again is something you don't really think about. You remember the ghosts, but most of the time you remember the ghosts who were there when Harry was there. Like Nearly Headless Nick, and things like that. Older people who have been there for years and years and years. We never remember or realise that there are probably a good few ghosts in that castle now that are teenage students who died in that battle, and it's so sad. I think that one of the greatest losses that anyone can endure is the loss of a child. I think the loss of a child just hits so deeply with so many people because it's innocence. It's a loss of innocence, and it's so sad. Oh gosh, this scene, I always find so sad because we never really saw much of Lily and James's death, but in the Deathly Hallows we do, and it is really, really sad. So this picture is Severus cradling Lily after she's died, after he's gone to the house in Godric's Hollow and found her. And I think this picture just sums everything up. It just sums Severus up in a nutshell, because we know that Snape was, throughout all of it, he was deeply in love with Lily, and he lived in that regret and longing and loss of Lily all throughout the series. And it's so sad because he's so misunderstood because of it. He is kind of assumed to be this mean, cold-hearted man throughout all of it. It's just nasty, mean professor, but he's not. He's so misunderstood. We know from the first meeting with Harry, when he says to Harry about what would I get if I added an infusion of wormwood? I can't remember. But we know from his first meeting with Harry that when he said about adding a Bezoar to an infusion of wormwood, I can't remember exactly what he said, but when he said about that, that was sort of Victorian flower language for I bitterly regret Lily's death. So I think throughout all of it, he was very misunderstood, and he was just living in constant regret of Lily's death and losing her and constant mourning. So I think that scene just completely sums Severus and everything he's been through up in a complete nutshell. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Molly Weasley tries to defeat a Boggart, it transforms into each of her family members in turn, including the twins, but they appear together because not even in her worst nightmares did she imagine Fred and George being separated. Okay. I'm not even going to explain that I've done so many Fred and George ones, and they are so intense. I can't even know. So this one is another Fred and George one. There's a picture of George with Ron, and you could just briefly see Hermione in the background. It just says the year we became I. I can't, because I've lost people in my life, we lost my uncle 7 months ago to lung cancer. And it took me a while to kind of get through the whole part of, saying whether he loves or he loved, or whether, when I'd talk about him and saying things in present and past tense and using those different tenses and just trying to figure out how to explain him. With the loss of my uncle, I'd say things like, oh, he loves to go fishing. And it would sort of catch me. I'd be like, oh, no, he loved. And it took me a while to figure out if I wanted to say he loves, he loved. And often I would catch myself out of it. I wouldn't realise that I was doing it. So I think the whole we became I, it really does show you the reality of that loss, because you know that George, even I'd still do it. George is going to be saying a lot, oh, we did that, we do this, we did that, me and Fred, and then remembering that Fred isn't there, and it's just, moving on. Oh, I don't have any more. Okay, that was the final one. That was definitely an emotional video. I think it really does remind you how significant these character deaths are, how significant a lot of the scenes are, and how creative people are really to come up with these pictures and things. So thank you for watching. Give this video a like, subscribe. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in another video again soon.